so my prediction that the mineral deal is going to be signed is coming closer and closer to reality. I don't think that the ego of the leaders is enough to stop national interests. Like, we don't live in the medieval time anymore. However, politicians do need votes. So if you're in front of the cameras and you're allowed to be stepped by another person, that can cost you approval ratings and votes. And so for those of you who actually followed the news and you listened to what J.D. Vance said, you listened to what Rubio said, you actually heard all the interviews, turns out that, no, this wasn't supposed to be a gotcha. Like, they weren't trying to trap Zelensky. They were actually just supposed to do what normally happens when an important deal is signed. They sit there, they talk with the journalists, they talk with the reporters, they smile to the cameras, and then they go sign the deal, and then they go have lunch. Like, literally, that was it. And apparently, if you listen to what Rubio said, he pointed out that the entire Trump team, like his advisors, were pressuring him to not allow the deal to go like this. And the main reason wasn't necessarily the argument, but it was going against what America is trying to accomplish. Like, America just wants out of this war. Now, whether you like it or not, this seems to be the mindset of the new establishment. This is how people voted. Trump actually campaigned that he will stop the war. Now, I personally believe that the reason they're trying to stop the war is, like, number one, they seem to be losing on the battlefield. Like, the only way that this can be won, from what I heard from various interviews with military analysts and things that are said on Fox News and CNN, they're basically saying that the only way it would be won is, like, NATO sending actual troops, like actual boots on the ground in Ukraine and trying to push for an invasion in Russia. Like, this seems to be, like, the only option that they can win. At least this is what the administration is saying. Like, this is what they've convinced themselves. I don't know if it's true or not. Like, I don't have the battle plans. I don't know how many soldiers Ukraine has killed. I don't know how many men they lost. I generally don't know. But, like, from a military analyst thing, like what they're saying to the public, seems to be that this can't carry on. It seems to be like the battle is losing, right? Like, you can have morality and values and ideas, but it seems like the only way would be to constantly escalate until, heaven forbid, it leads to World War III. This is what Trump told Zelensky. It's like, look, it can lead to World War III. Now, the United States wants to focus on China. China is a state that's more technologically advanced than Russia, more economically powerful. And so, like, they want to focus their attention over there. And they don't want to be opened on two fronts. They don't want to have to fight in Ukraine and at the same time also deal with China. So they just want to end it in Ukraine. They just want to find out a way that, you know, like, obviously both sides are going to get something. And so they're trying to get Zelensky to sign the mineral deal in order for America to now have a vested interest in Ukraine, to join each other in economic partnership. And then if Russia attacks again, well, now it would be like declaring war to America, because that's where their strategic interests are. So it would be a different way of convincing the American voter, a different way of convincing the American people. It's like, no, we gotta defend Ukraine because, like, we're mining there, we're harvesting there. It benefits our country. Those minerals are of strategic importance to modern technology, and we gotta defend them. Like, that's a different thing when you tell it to the American people. Now, I understand Zelensky's point of view as well. For those of you who don't know history, when the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine became one of the world's largest nuclear military power. Because they ended up with having a lot of nukes from the Soviet era that was on their land. And so America and the Soviet and the Russia basically said, all right, we're going to guarantee your territorial independence, because take into account at that time, nobody knew what's going to happen. I mean, Romania has territorial claims in Ukraine. This is why one of the presidential candidates got into trouble. There's other neighbors that can have territorial claims as well, right? So, like, at the time, no one knew what the new thing is going to be in Europe. And so Ukraine went like, okay, we're going to give you the nukes, but you guys are going to guarantee our territorial integrity. And they both signed on it. Now, Russia is the one invading, so it would be America's obligation to defend Ukraine's territory because they signed the contract. Like, no one forced them to sign. They wanted this, and they got something in return. They denuclearized Ukraine. But the thing with America, if you look at its history, like they when they sign a contract, they usually keep their deal, but then it's like, but what else are you willing to do for us? Right? So like, yes, we had the treaty, yeah, but like, what else are you willing to do? So in this case, yeah, I can see why the Ukrainians are feeling extorted, because like they already signed the contract, and now the Americans like, what else are you giving us? Like, what else do you have? Still, you know, like, you gotta come to grips with reality, with the world you live in, and the deal seems to be either you give them the mineral resources and they give you a percentage in exchange, or they don't have to give you weapons, right? I mean, they violated the treaty, and who are you going to complain to? Like, what's going to happen? They're the United States. They're the world hegemon. Like, what court can you take them to? Who can force them to keep sending aid to you, right? And so, what ends up happening is that it is in Ukraine's interest to sign. Like, take into account that Russia hasn't taken Kiev. Russia hasn't conquered all of the Ukraine, and on top of that, they also did the regime change. So if Ukrainians want sovereignty, well, they have to play ball with the Americans. It's not just like that the American help is essential from a military point of view. Because, yeah, like, theoretically, they could still get help from the European Union, but the sanctions on Russia are equally important. The sanctions on Russia are the only way that they could possibly win, because the idea is that by crippling Russia's economy, they would not be able to continue the war effort for too long. And so you need the Americans to keep doing the sanctions. So this is why, you know, after the spat that Zelensky had with Trump, and one of the main reasons that Trump said he wanted this debate to be public is because he said that this is how Zelensky behaves himself in private when negotiating behind closed doors. And according to him, this is what upset Biden as well. Like, the same attitude that Zelensky had towards Trump is the same attitude that he was having towards Biden. And there's, like, interviews where Biden actually has said that he was a little bit upset after the negotiation. So I do believe what he said, right? He wanted it so the public can see the way he behaves. And my take is that, yeah, like, the deal is going to be signed because the national interest is more important than the ego of people, of the leaders. And also take into account that Raytheon missile defense and all the American industrial war complex, they're salivating at this shit. I mean, they absolutely love this shit. Imagine allowing the Europeans to keep manufacturing weapons and selling them to Ukraine while the American military industrial complex gets cocked. Like, that's not going to happen, right? And so, from this, the talks from Rubio and J.D. Vance, they said that Zelensky was still controversial, while his retinue was almost brought to tears, because they understand how important this deal is. In the meantime, I think the United States actually suspended all of the help that is going to Ukraine, which, you know, is not something big on a short term, because they're probably still stocked up. But if, like, the suspension happens long term, then they're going to feel the pain. And so this is when Zelensky comes out and publishes this on his Twitter account, saying that, I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us wants an endless war. Because, like, again, you know, it's like appeasement bad. Like, I get it, but, like, how many men are going to be fed to the meat grinder? Like, at some point, you're going to run out of men, right? You know, like, this is what Trump is trying to say. It's like, is this sustainable? For how long? Like, how long can you keep fighting? Because they're not sending soldiers, they're just sending weapons, right? And, like, you need to have someone to carry the weapon. If you look at the population of Russia, it's over 100 million. You look at the population of Ukraine, it's smaller. And so you gotta wonder, like, how long can you keep it up? And no one seems to answer this. Like, no one from the European Union has answered this. No one from Ukraine is answering this. It's just constantly give money, constantly give weapons, and something magical will happen at some point in time. Now, take into account that the reason the Russians aren't faring well is that when you're attacking, the KDA is of a very poor ratio for the attacker. I think it's like 3-1 or 4-1, something like that. And so the Ukrainians have an easier time defending. But if they want to go and take back Crimea, for instance, well, they're going to be the ones that are suffering the 4-1 ratio. And so, like, this is what the Pentagon is looking at. It's like, well, can they even do it? Like, what is the win conditioning here? It's like taking back all of their territories. Great. Can they accomplish this, like physically? And what they're concluding is that the more the war goes on, the more territory they lose. And then when they're going to sue for peace 5 years from now, it's just going to be more people dead. And on top of that, even more territory losses, right? So like the math doesn't check out. Now, again, you may disagree with this. I'm not saying that this is something that you need to come to terms with or agree or anything like that. But it's what the American administration is thinking. This is their mindset. This is the logic that they're using to come up with the decisions. Now, the counter-argument is like, well, this is Russian propaganda. Like, I don't fucking know. I mean, it's America, right? The world hegemon. I find it difficult to believe that they don't have their own intelligence agencies to tell them what's on the ground. And I also find it difficult to believe that since Ukraine is working with the Pentagon for intelligence, the Pentagon doesn't actually know the numbers. Like, I haven't seen any people coming out contradicting this claim and saying, like, no, nonsense. Like, obviously, victory is around the corner. Like, no one is saying that, right? The only thing that we can notice is that there's going to be more escalation. And on top of that, you have, like, the European Union now getting the idea of an army. Like things are getting concerning. You know, in my opinion, I do think that the world is moving closer to World War III. Which is not a good thing, especially when people have nukes. For some reason, that seems to not be on the table now. However, of course, you know, if Russia does decide to invade yet again, and you now have a demilitarized zone with British and French troops over there, and you also have Americans' interest there, oh, then I think it's going to be really bad for the Russians. Like, at that point, I genuinely think, you know, like, okay, you tried with Crimea once, you got appeasement. You tried with Ukraine a second time, you got millions of dead, massive economic damage. If you're going to try a third time, then I think, like, literally everyone is going to be sick at that point. So this is, like, one of the reasons that I do think that Trump's peace plan may actually work. And as you can see, Zelensky also agrees, like, they want to work to an end of the war. First stages could be the release of prisoners and truce in the sky, ban on missile, long-range drones, bombs on energy and other civilian infrastructure, truce in the sea immediately. If Russia will do the same, then we want to move very fast through all the stages to work with the final deal. Now, the interesting question that I see on Twitter is like, well, what if Russia doesn't agree? And the answer is like, well, if Russia doesn't agree, then you're not going to be on the Americans' bad side. You literally get what you want if they don't agree. You keep getting weapons from America, you keep getting money from them, you keep getting their support. And Russia is going to be on the Americans' bad side then, because that's literally how this negotiation works, right? Like, Trump comes up with a deal, with a plan, and the party that doesn't go with the plan, they seem to get suffering. It's pretty much how Trump works. Like, he's been in office for 4 years in the first presidency, and now he's been for a couple of months. Like, we know how he does things, right? Like, he makes demands, and you're allowed to either go with his demand or against. If you go against his demand, you get tariffs, you get sanctions, you get punishment, you get suffering. And usually most world leaders seem to be like, oh shit, okay, well, we're going to actually do what you say. And so in the event that Putin doesn't agree with this, well, he gets on the bad side of the Americans. So he says that he really values how much America has done to help Ukraine, and we remember the moment when things changed, when President Trump provided Ukraine with javelins. We are grateful for this. Our meeting in Washington, and again, like this, I think just shows that Trump genuinely wants peace. Like, he did provide Ukraine with javelins when he was in office before. Like, no one else did that at the time, if you guys remember. Like, there's even an article, I think it was in the New York Times, where when the press was publishing stuff, it's like, oh, I know on a good authority, we got a good source, where Trump told Putin that if he invades Ukraine, he's going to bomb Moscow. And people were freaking out at the time. They was like, oh my goodness, like, that's so unthinkable. Oh, he's going to start World War III. Do you guys remember that shit? It was during the first Trump presidency. But, like, he had, like, a very strong stance, and I genuinely believe, like probably Putin believed as well. It's like, okay, if I invade while this guy is in office, maybe the madman would actually start bombing Moscow. Who the fuck knows? But, like, he was very strong on this stuff. Like, he genuinely wanted people to stop fighting. Our meeting in Washington at the White House did not go the way it was supposed to be. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right. We would like future cooperation and communication to be constructive. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign anytime in any convenient format. We see this agreement as a step towards greater security and solid security guarantees, and I truly hope it will work effectively. 1.2 million views. Yeah, so we're going back to my prediction. The thing is going to get signed, and then it's going to be interesting to see if Russia wants to play ball. And if they don't, well, you're going to get the Biden administration all over again, where I think like Trump is actually going to give white checks to Ukraine and allow them to fight for how much is needed. Because at that point, the ball is in Russia's court. And that's how I predict that Trump does diplomacy. So anyway, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. Take care.